This week, I've got The Fantastic Four, First Steps, and the Fantastic Four are an interesting set of characters in that we've seen them actually a decent amount on screen in the last 20 years. We're not going to talk about the 1994 Roger Corman executive produced version that nobody got to see because it was unreleased. But going back to 2005, I am someone who didn't hate that first version of it. And, I'm not here to defend it. I have not seen it since. I'm not implying it was a good film, but, it was a time where we weren't getting superhero movies that often. It had Yoan Gruffudd, Jessica Alba, Chris Evans in his first Marvel role, and I do think Michael Chiklis was perfect casting as Ben Grimm. And then 10 years after that, so not even that long, we get another reboot, right? With Miles Teller, Kate Mara, Michael B. Jordan, also in his first Marvel role, and Jamie Bell, and we don't have to talk about that one. So it has been 10 years since we've seen the kind of mega version of these characters on screen. We have seen a Mr. Fantastic in Multiverse of Madness, but anyway, so the Fantastic Four First Steps is kind of similar to Superman, which just came out, in that it is hazarding a guess that the audience probably knows something about them, that they are a family of superheroes, etc. If you're not aware, the Fantastic Four are a family of superheroes, a family both by blood and marriage and just, the family that you find. So this time around, we've got Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, Vanessa Kirby as Sue Storm, Ebon Moss-Bachrach as Ben Grimm, and Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. They make the Fantastic Four. And again, like Superman, this is a film that is an origin story to a degree, but it's not dwelling too much on the origin. And I think this really works to its advantage. We are dropping into an existing world, a very well-crafted world. I think that is one of the strongest things about this film. And it's not spending too much time about, how they got their powers. It's not spending too much time on how they got their powers or coming out of the superhero closet and people like finding out who they are. This is a world in which the Fantastic Four have already existed for a while, much like Superman. I think it was a very smart move, credit to James Gunn for doing it for Superman, and credit to director Matt Shakman and the writers of Fantastic Four, The First Steps. That name is very cumbersome. I'm probably just going to keep calling it Fantastic Four from this point on. So we are existing in a world. I think the design of this world is very cool. It's kind of retro future, it's like 60s, but the future we were promised with flying cars, but kind of like the egg chair designs. And I really enjoyed it. It felt fully realized. Also, this movie is clearly a film made by people who love comic books. And generally, I think this is a positive. It works to their advantage. There are a ton of references, both visually and verbally and all these things that are both mild lore, which I recognize, and I'm only, again, barely into the world of this type of thing, or deep cuts, which people around me during my screening were like pointing out or recognizing. And so I don't think it's too cumbersome, which is good, because I think a lot of times you can get bogged down in the Easter eggs. But you can tell that this is a film made with love and with passion. The stakes of this movie are interesting in that because we've kind of shortcutted the existence of these characters and that we're just, going into it with them being superheroes, the stakes feel accelerated very quickly. And this is one of those moments where I have to go, okay, well, I have a knowledge of the big bad. And, I hope this isn't a spoiler because it's in the trailers. The big bad is Galactus, which in the Marvel universe is one of the biggest bads. He eats planets. He is the eater of planets. That is huge, right? Just from a scale standpoint. And I think, we've all been excited for it. And it's interesting to skip over Victor Von Doom and go to Galactus first. And again, this is getting into the nitty gritty, but that is what they've chosen to do. But as a byproduct of it, we spend time getting to know these characters, and there's a very smart conceit in it. This is a film about family, ultimately. There's a very smart conceit into it that makes it a very personal stakes. But by the same token, there are moments where I'm like, this feels like a much bigger threat than like this set of characters. I have trust in this set of characters to handle, because you are assuming that we are just giving them our goodwill because they are characters that we know. I think it's a tough line to walk there. And I'm like, I don't know about that. There are a handful of things that this film acknowledges that so many superhero films do not. And I'm so grateful to it. It is so minor. I will talk about it in a roundtable at some point. But, I think it's overall balanced. The thing I kept wondering during this film is, and I wonder it during a lot of films, will my parents understand this movie? Because they are often my barometer for general audiences, right? They are not deep-cut, hardcore Marvel fans. They see Marvel movies. A lot of the times they wait till they're on like Disney Plus, etc. But, they are not as entrenched in these worlds, and they have not been following the details of the MCU for the last 20, etc. years as closely as a lot of the rest of us have. On a large scale, yeah, they're totally going to get this film. And I think one of the things I liked the most about this film, it's like I said, it's a kind of origin story, but it's not a film that required me to do any homework on any of the other Marvel films to this point. It helps that I know all of this stuff. And again, some of the stakes are raised because I know a lot of these things. But this is one of those movies I can finally say, and I have not been able to say in a long time with a Marvel movie. Yeah, if you didn't know anything else about the MCU, you could totally tap into this film. You would be totally fine. So from that standpoint, yeah, I think my parents would understand it. There are a lot of the things in between that they'd have a lot of questions about, which is why, again, I sometimes prefer they don't go to theaters and talk. They don't talk during movies because that would be monstrous. But, I'm like, oh, this is one of those ones that it's going to be a lot of answers. The other thing I want to talk about are the performances, because you do have this stellar cast. And I was really impressed by Vanessa Kirby in it. She is, I think, the heart of this film, which shouldn't really come as a surprise. She is a great actress. The Pedro Pascal part of it. I love Pedro Pascal. I think Pedro Pascal is a superb actor. I've seen him give brilliant dramatic performances that are heartbreaking. I've seen him do some pretty comedic things. This didn't necessarily feel like it had to be Pedro Pascal. He's not bad in it by any means. Like, don't get me wrong here. But, I think a lot of people are going to go to this film because of Pedro Pascal. And I'm like, I know he's capable of more, and I wish he had been given the opportunity to do more. There are a couple showcase scenes, but I'm like, this maybe could have been an opportunity that went to a different actor, ? And again, I'm not impugning his performance. I think he did a good job, but he is one of those characters who his reputation is starting to maybe overshadow his performances. And so if those performances don't match the expectation level, it creates this kind of little bit of dissonance there. So again, he's totally fine in it. Reed Richards is not the most interesting character to me. I love Ben Grimm. I thought Eben Moss-Bachrach was great in it, although the visuals of Ben Grimm at some points are a little disconcerting. I know it's comic accurate, but it's really imbalanced at certain points, and this is a minor, kind of like animation design note. But eventually it fills out, although there are times where I'm like, you are moving way too quickly and way too lightly for a character that should weigh as much as you do. But this is a thing that probably a ton of people won't bump up against. Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, I think, did a good job. He's maybe not as cad-ish as we've seen Johnny Storm be in the past, but if you don't know anything about Johnny Storm, then you have no expectations going into this, and you're totally fine. Julia Garner is the Silver Surfer, which is fine. I have to wonder, like, have we really not improved visuals and technology? And I know metallics are a hard thing to deal with, and there's only so much you can do with them, but like, I feel like this is on par with the 2005 or 2007 Silver Surfer. If not, they did it better, ? And maybe some of it's, the poppiness of the world that she's existing in versus the kind of more realistic, grounded. I mean, not that this isn't grounded, but, it's less stylized world of the other one. But she is fine as the Silver Surfer. Ralph Ineson, again, an actor who I've seen brilliant performances for, is Galactus. I'm like, okay, this is fine. This is fine. There's a couple other folks in this film who I think bring a little bit of levity to it in a good way. I have to compliment the score. I think Michael Giacchino did a very good job here, but that's not a surprise. He's very good at his job. But overall, I definitely enjoyed the Fantastic Four First Steps, because it didn't require too much of me. I didn't have to remember things from other films, which was just really a refreshing experience. I'm like, let's just wipe the MCU clean. I'm ready for it. Here we go. This is a perfect restart. Let's just do it. There are some larger plot points in this that I'm like, this is a little thin here, or like, you are definitely utilizing audience goodwill, but because it seems like it is coming from a place that is earnest and genuine as filmmakers and just like fans of this universe who clearly have an understanding of it and are maybe trying to show off a little bit sometimes, but from a joyous place, I think it just overall ends up being a good time at the movies. I think a movie like Thunderbolts, which came out a few months ago, which is so strange to me that it's only been a few months since their last Marvel movie, but that one I think did a really good job with some of the emotions and going to places that I was not expecting in a Marvel movie. This one almost gets there. It has emotions, it has some plots that are just inherently emotional, and I think shortcut a little bit again, will be nice and we'll say they were being strategic, but I do think some of it's like, all right, well, we know this is like an automatic emotional thing, so let's use this to kind of band-aid over maybe some of the larger plot holes here. But I still had a good time at the movies. It zipped along. Like I said, if you are my parents, you're going to ask a fair number of questions during it, but you'll also still be entertained and have a good time. I'm going to give this a 4.1 out of 5.